So I hope you had a chance to talk a little bit with your with a partner or with your group about the different types of assessments that you might be using in a classroom or different types of assessments you've observed before. It can be helpful to kind of think of those real life examples and whether they are examples of mastery, of CBM, of progress monitoring, of diagnostic. And speaking of diagnostic, we're going to move on next to talk a little bit more about diagnostic assessment in particular. You're going to learn about specific reading skills or strategies that this diagnostic assessment can lead you to. As you're creating those strategies for teaching, we really want to focus on what those specific skills are. In general, we administer diagnostic assessments before we decide what skill or content to teach. Although this extra assessment may take some time at the front end, it saves instructional time later by ensuring you don't spend time teaching skills or content that the student already knows. You know how you hate that when you go in and it's a complete sort of reteaching of something you've already learned. It would be better to assess up front what you already know about a particular topic or content, and then we can start with the learning at the point that you're at. Later, as you move forward with a student, if the curriculum-based measurements, if the CBMs indicate the student will not meet a goal or is not responding, then we may have to go back and give additional diagnostic or different diagnostics to help us tailor content even further, or to go back and reteach content. But we'll talk a little bit about those diagnostic assessments as we move through this next portion. So let's look again at where diagnostic assessment falls. Here it is right in the middle of our framework from the National Center on Intensive Intervention. Remember, this is a framework for DBI, or data-based instruction. So we've got our general outcome measures, our CBMs that we use for progress monitoring. And here's that diagnostic assessment that we're really talking about. We're really thinking about academic assessment. On the behavior side, we're thinking about functional assessment as well. And then we've got this specific error analysis, specific skill analysis, CBM with error analysis, or curriculum-based assessment that can also inform those diagnostic pieces. Diagnostic assessment also aligns with those big ideas in reading that we talked about before, like those big 5, phonological awareness, phonics, or decoding, vocab, fluency, comprehension. A diagnostic assessment helps us a lot with instructional planning. It helps us to determine areas of strength and need. It can be criterion-referenced, meaning we have a specific criteria we're shooting for students. Basically, it answers the question of, what specific reading skills do I need to teach? These assessments are intended to determine whether or not a student has mastered a certain set of skills. Remember, just a minute ago I mentioned criteria. So here we might suggest the criteria has to be 90% accurate, or a 90% accuracy or better. We might be moving the student toward a specific criteria. Once the student has mastered the skill, 90%, for instance, in this case, then we need to move on and assess different skills, the next set of skills. So for instance, an assessment may identify letter names the student has mastered and letter names the student has not yet mastered. When the student has mastered all the letter names, this assessment's no longer needed. However, we may need to do some maintenance probes along the way just to recheck that skill. Skills that are assessed should be skills needed for proficient reading. And that gives us a sense of, as teachers, of what skills we need to focus on next. So here's one example. This is from the Consortium on Reading Excellence. You've heard us talking about the Core Phonics Survey. They've come out with a book that has lots of different types of assessments in it. assessing reading using multiple measures. It includes diagnostic assessments in several areas that are tied to those big ideas of reading. Why do we mention this one? It's actually hard to find diagnostic measures out there that are commercially available. And so this is one example of a place where you can get those diagnostic assessments in all of these areas, big areas of reading, in one place. So we were just mentioning this core phonics survey, and you might have heard me speaking about this before, but this is just an example of that survey. This is actually the teacher record form that would be used. In a minute, we're going to show you an example of a scored student record form. So on here you can see the different skills in sort of hierarchical order. So we've got things like letter recognition, uppercase, lowercase, letter names, consonant sounds. Down here we've got decoding skills like short vowels and CVC words, all the way down to long vowel spellings, multisyllabic words. You can see that the teacher would have the opportunity 6 different times to collect data on 6 different dates on this record sheet. What does this provide you? It gives you information about skills to review with the student, skills that still need to be taught with the student, and it gives you a sense of where students are sort of, what they've mastered and what they still need to work on. It's really ideally then used to inform instructional planning. Here's an example of a profile sheet for a student who's a little bit older. As we look through, we can think about using this as a screener, fall, winter, spring. So there are measures that are included in this core multiple measures book that include comprehension through Maze, reading fluency measures, vocabulary screening, higher frequency words. So kind of goes down through some of those skills that align with the big areas of reading, with those big ideas of reading. It really helps us then determine areas of strength and need, just like Ms. Smith determined for Zane, and helps us target what areas we need to work on next. So here's an example of a quick phonics screener. In this case, there's some nonsense words. We've seen examples of those before. Students would either say the word or say the sounds to give us a sense of whether they are on track with their decontextualized decoding skills. Then we have some sentence reading. The words that are selected are particular phonics elements, but they're in the context of a sentence, so we can get a sense of things like blends, digraphs, sight words in this sentence, sort of contextual sentence setting. And there are other links to different types of screeners or diagnostic measures. Back to our friends at the National Center on Intensive Intervention, there are diagnostic tools listed. There's a lot more information about diagnostic data in general at this link on the Intensive Intervention website. So go to your workbook now, and I want you to answer the following question. Which of the following statements are true? Diagnostic assessments align with big ideas, are used to inform instructional planning, help determine areas of strength and areas of instructional need, are criterion referenced. Which of the following are true? Go ahead and indicate that in your workbook. So I hope you said that all of those are true. All of these are characteristics of diagnostic assessments, and so you can see they're really functional and important skills for teachers. All right, let's look at an example of a scored copy of a core phonics survey. You'll see this on the next slide. I want you to think about and jot down in your workbook. You might talk a little bit with someone next to you. I want you to think about how this diagnostic assessment aligns with big ideas of reading, might be used to inform instructional planning, helps determine areas of strengths and areas of need, and is criterion referenced. So those clear characteristics of diagnostic assessment. Talk a little bit about how this example that we're going to see next from the Core Phonics survey, how it illustrates those characteristics. Would you spend your time teaching letter names? Why or why not? And then what decoding skills would you first target in your instruction? So think about these questions and jot down some of your ideas in your workbook. Share them out with a partner as you look at this example. So just to kind of give you a sense of what this example is, we've got different skills like short vowels, digraphs, and the TCH trigraph. We've got consonant blends. Okay, so we've got short vowels, we've got consonant blends with short vowels, we've got long vowels, and then we've got R and L controlled vowels. As the student went through and read these, the words that are crossed out are the words that the student answered incorrectly. So what do you see as you look through? What do you see as the patterns of students as the student read these words? What are the patterns that you see that are strengths? What are patterns that are weaknesses? Over here on this side, you can see the times when the student answered correctly for real or pseudo words. Okay, so it could be that the student's having particular patterns in reading real or pseudo words. So I want you to think about these answers on the Core Phonics survey as you answer these questions. Okay, so take a minute to do that. So finally, as we come back together, take another look at this one more time. Hopefully you shared your answers to some of those questions. Take just a few minutes more to examine the student's performance on this particular measure. What are the patterns of mistakes within each section? What would you target first and second? And hopefully you came up with some of those ideas as you explored those questions on the previous slide.